Hello, hello, hello. This is Danny Ceballos with Unleashed Consulting and the Best Boss podcast. Welcome, dear listener. So excited to have you here today and super excited to welcome my longtime friend and colleague and thought partner, Kendall LaPorte. Kendall, just say hi before I introduce you.
Glenn. Hi, Danny. So happy to be here.
Yay, Kendall's here. Kendall and I have known each other for quite a few years. In fact, we both graduated with master's degrees in organizational development about 12, 13 years ago, which is kind of cray-cray to think about. Kendall remains in California while I'm in New York, but we stay joined at the hip, partners in crime, and a lot of work that we do together and a lot of relationships that we continue to maintain and nurture. So really delighted to have her here. And we're really going to be talking about something that I have found fascinating over the years. And Kendall is kind of my go-to person on understanding and working with it. And that is shadow work and understanding shadow work. So I'm going to introduce Kendall and then we're going to get right into it. And Kendall, we're going to start off just asking you what is shadow work? So Kendall LaPorte is a seasoned organizational development consultant and executive coach. With a diverse background spanning various sectors, Kendall brings a special keen interest in leadership development and extensive experience in change management as well as learning and development, particularly in the biotech realm. What distinguishes Kendall is her passion for fostering consciousness and intentionality into everyday life, coupled with her unique perspective on using challenges as valuable tools for growth. Awesome, Kendall. Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about who you are or where you are before we get started?
Well, I'm here in sunny Oakland this morning. And no, I think that the intro just about nails it. So, yeah, let's dive right in.
Yeah, there is so much more I could tell you about Kendall, though, but I will tell you just off the cuff her passion is legit, her intellect is legit, her desire and drive for change, authentic, beautiful, sustainable change in the world and in individuals is legit and with a lot of credibility and credentials. So, Kendall, you're not saying nearly enough about how amazing you are, but so Kendall, tell us what is shadow work and tell us a little bit about how you've used it and why it's been important for you.
Okay. So, shadow work is a concept. It was developed originally by Carl Jung. And I believe he wrote about it it's called the Red Book or something like that. And my understanding is it's very dense technical text on shadow work. And then Debbie Ford, who I was introduced to shadow work through, she reinvigorated it and made it more user friendly, as you've said before, in the late '90s, early 2000s, in a book called Dark Side of the Light Chasers. And that's how I was introduced to it. So what it is shining a light. So the process of shadow work is uncovering those parts of ourselves that we have suppressed, repressed, disowned, what have you. And then the process is bringing that to light. And the reason for doing it, of course, is to walk the earth as more integrated beings, which has so many benefits that we can get into as we talk more. But it's really just the process of recognizing and pulling into the light those parts of ourselves that we've disowned for whatever reason.
Huh. So
Yeah.
it's interesting because that definition makes me think, oh, that's the last thing I want to do. It's-
Yeah. And actually, I love that you said that because there are different ways to mine for these repressed parts, and the ones that Debbie introduced me to actually makes it really fun for me. For me, it made it fun, and that's what I've shared with you in the past, and probably why you got curious about it. But there are different ways to mine for these parts, and why do we disown them, right? I mean, I think it's worth looking at why we would do that in the first place. And it can be to uphold some vision of ourself that we want to present because we cherish a certain persona maybe that we've seen in someone else, and then we're just going through life in a persona
Yeah.
trying to be this one thing that we've determined is good, and then we're leaving all of this other part of ourself behind. It can be in to accommodate a parent. It can be to accommodate social norms or what have you. But I think the real money piece with this is that to disown something, you have to have owned it, meaning it is a part of you.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, good point.
So
Yeah, yeah.
so any part of yourself, just like anything that is like being ignored, it's going to want attention. And
Mhm.
this, yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So can you give us a little bit more of the granularity of it? How did it work in your life? Maybe a little bit about your experience and maybe what you uncovered?
Yeah, yeah. So I found the book when I was actually going through a divorce, and I was in a lot of emotional pain, frustration, anger, going through those stages of grief, and I was pulling on any string that I could to find a new way to deal with it, talk therapy, exercise, what have you. So I found the book, and I believe that Debbie actually was going through a divorce when she wrote it, or her divorce really informed the work for her, at least. And for me, what was different about it was it put me in the driver's seat of accepting responsibility, and it took the blame game and kind of turned it back, which is very empowering. And actually, I want to pause there because that really is, there's this really great secret with the shadow, which is the most terrifying parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at. That's why we've disowned them. We think with our brain that it's going to hurt or kill us. It feels very like literally threatening. You can feel
Uh,
your heart beating and so on. If we admit even that they exist, or if we take a moment to look at them, and the exact opposite happens. The exact opposite, I promise you. It's like just this. I mean, I'll give you this example. After the workshop, I I was so light, just physically light and like unburdened with these things that just came up to the light around what I was ashamed of, and
uh-huh.
and and what I had disowned and what I'd put on other people. And I was working in a restaurant. We were going to grad school at the time, and I was working in a restaurant. And these ladies I was waiting on, they just said at the end of, right before they left, they said, we just have to tell you, there's something about your energy that's just like so light, and so it's been so neat to interact with you. And I say that not like to flatter myself, but it just shows that it was palpable. The change was literally palpable. It was a physical change that happened.
Would you be willing to share what it was that you showed
uh,
light on for yourself?
well, there's a lot. So it's a 2.5 day workshop. And so the answer is yes. I have no problem sharing if I can go back to
Yeah.
that time, and it was quite some time ago. But what I recall, so there's okay, so there's a few things about the workshop that are significant around the shadow work. So let me just go there for a second, and then if I can recall exactly like some of the things that I actually came up with, I'm happy to share that. But they do an interesting thing at the workshop, which is the staff that is there to support, say there's 150 participants, they're trained not to emote at all when you are interacting with them, because the goal is for the participants to become self-referencing, so that you aren't looking for reinforcement from other people, because that just strengthens your persona. So if you're saying hi and they're saying hi, then it's like, oh, they think I'm nice. Oh, they're smiling at me. So they're all just like this all of the time. And then on the time, during the times that you aren't actually in the workshop, so when you're at lunch, when you're at dinner, when you go to your hotel at night, you're not supposed to talk to anyone. No television, no radio, no exercise, nothing. I know that can sound possibly a little culty as I'm saying it, but it's not. It's specifically to just really go into yourself and analyze, and basically you're in a state of complete self-analysis. And that is one of the reasons why I think it's valuable for leaders, because the importance of feedback, giving and receiving feedback, is a core accountability and responsibility of leaders. And this, it provides a method for self feedback in some ways. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes me think about Johari's window and the model of Johari's window and things we know that others know, things we know others don't know, but there are always these blind spots. And so, yeah, I'm with you on the importance of feedback, giving and receiving as a
Yep.
critical foundational competency for excellence in leadership. Yeah, and I'm really struck by this experience that you had and how it was. how it was framed and how it was presented and how it worked for you. It's also making me think about, honestly, like coming out as a gay man. And when I came out, when I was, I mean, many, many years ago, but I really didn't come out until I was 25 years old, which even then was kind of late. And I wasn't doing shadow. Well, maybe I was doing shadow work, but it's what, the parts of myself that I hated were the parts that I repressed until I met Tom. That was not by design. It just happened. And
But
then,
let's pause there for 1 second, not to interrupt, but you just said something that's so key to the shadow work was the parts of yourself that you hated, that you repressed, and then you met Tom, and those parts that you hated came into the light,
yes, indeed,
correct?
indeed.
And what was your physical experience when that
It
happened?
was everything you just said. It was the next morning. It was I remember walking with a distinct lightness and a real sense of, I mean, I refer to it as that's when I was reborn. I mean, there was that sense, and when I won the lottery and everything, it was just when I felt, yes, aligned, integrated. I mean, and it was important for me to come out to everybody at that point because it would just felt, I mean, there was a lot of terror in that. I'll say that too. That was also when, yeah, it was when I was walking back to my car thinking, oh my God, some people will kill me today. They wouldn't have killed me yesterday. There are people out there that want to do harm to me. So there was that reality, but actually that felt like a good trade-off. I mean, it was a terrible trade-off.
Right.
It was a good trade because of that lightness and that empowerment. Yeah, but I don't know. Like, I imagine you didn't have Tom at the workshop. Like, so how does
Yeah.
it? So how do my listeners, individual managers and leaders, so to go to the book, to do some research, to perhaps find a workshop, but what are things that folks can do on their own to maybe start to look
Yeah.
into a shadow, or maybe you can't do it on your own? I don't know.
No, actually, you can. Yeah, you absolutely can. And so I want to just pause though, if
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can, just back to the example that you just shared. So that's one scenario where there's something we know about ourselves, right? You're gay, and you know that you don't like that, and then you take this step to pull that part into the light and just experiment with it. You have this wonderful experience where you're like, wow, this feels so much better. Okay. And it really changes the trajectory of your life, that one thing. Okay. So then another scenario, this is more applicable to me. One of the things that came up in the workshop for me was around my anger and the way that I displayed anger, which impacted my marriage, which was
Uh-huh.
part. So I had a lot of shame around when I would yell, how I would display my anger. And so that's not necessarily something that you want to be like, oh, I don't like that. And then be like, okay, actually, I do like it, or I'm going to own it and I'm just going to bring it into the light and then keep demonstrating anger in this way. It doesn't work like that. So with that particular thing, it was identifying where my demonstration of anger in that way started. Where did I, because not everybody does that. Some people will go their whole life and never yell.
Right.
But it was like the norm for me when I would get elevated to a certain point. That was just how I responded. And then it was this discovery to find out, oh yeah, this is why I do that from my childhood. This was how it served me
Yeah,
in my childhood.
I get that.
And so that released my shame
Hmm.
around how I demonstrated it, which put me in the driver's seat more. And I don't know how this works exactly. Like, I don't understand the magic of it, but something about seeing the value in it
Hmm.
made it easier to regulate. Because I was like, oh, I was doing it in childhood because it did feel like a life or death situation to me. And so when my body gets to this certain point, my subconscious registers that as life or death, and so I lash out as if it is. So just understanding kind of the genesis of it and helped release my shame around it, which then put me in the driver's seat a little bit more. a lot more. It literally transformed my the way that I'm more selective about when I need to go into hyper protection mode. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I totally get that. I like that. That's the work I do in positive intelligence has a framework around understanding your saboteurs and your sabotaging ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving, recognizing there's a strength in there, and then it's to discern
exactly.
when is it working for me. What
Yeah.
I was going
You
to go ahead.
you were going to ask about like how you can do it, right? How you
Yes,
can mine for these
yes,
things on your
yes,
own.
yes.
Yeah, so there's I believe Jung did a lot with dreams. Well, I know that he did a lot with dream therapy, but I think also in regard to his shadow work. So you can maybe have recurring dreams can be like one way that you can dig into it. You can sit and reflect, meditate on what is the worst thing that someone could say to you, could call you, for example,
Mm-hmm,
right? If
mm-hmm,
someone like, oh my gosh, if someone called me stupid, or if someone called me
mm-hmm.
ugly, or if someone called me cheap, or so, what is that one thing that would be the worst thing? And there's definitely some shadow work to do there. Like you can dig into that. That's another way to look at it.
Oh, scary.
And yeah, it is. It is. And but like you experienced, it has this
Mm-hmm.
kind of magical, unexpected impact. But the funnest way for me is to see what charges me the most in other people, because that is I've shared this with you before. I'll try to share it verbally, but it's really a visual exercise that Debbie demonstrated in the workshop, which is she had all of these stickers of words like, cheap, ugly, whatever, bossy, bitchy, and put them all like on her chest. And she's looked out at us. She's like, I can't see any of this. It's in me. It's on me. I can't see it. But look what happens. And she took one off and like put it on another person. And she's like, oh, now I can see cheap. It's on you. You're cheap. Oh, I can see you're ugly. You're this, you're that, because it's projection. That is how we find our shadow, is through projection. We can do it in all of these other ways. But that to me is the most fun way, because you walk through life then, and rather than just settling into judgment of somebody else, you're like, wow, that's me. Some part of that is me. And the more intense you are about it, the more you know that there's some part of you that you're judging there.
Yeah.
And it's not noticing necessarily, right? Because there are people who are cheap,
Yes,
blah
exactly.
blah. I don't, there are these people, but
Yeah.
there was actually a great example in the workshop. It was around this time. There was I think it might have been Spitzer. I don't know exactly, but there was some governor or congressman or something who was just rabid about stopping prostitution. And then they found out that he was like going and seeing prostitutes all the time.
That could
So
be
it's like,
one of a number of many politics. Yes. Uh-huh.
right, but it's like whatever, you're really 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 judgy and trying to suppress in other people, like they shouldn't be like that. um I will say, can be really good data for yourself. I mean, obviously this isn't doesn't mean that you're never going to judge someone who just is doing something rotten. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was
yeah,
thinking the same thing. Yeah, I love that. It's almost gamifying that
it
experience.
totally gamifies it. Yeah,
Yeah, but I really appreciate that there are going to be exceptions to this too, or it's I'm thinking politics, right? I mean, there's just, there are some folks that it would be really hard for me to say the thing,
oh, I
right?
love that. I love that you brought that up, because I can we just say that I can assume I know who you're talking about.
Yes, you can, and you are right.
This is fascinating, and I've thought about this exactly with Trump. We're just going to say the name, because those people who identify, who are super anti-Trump and who identify specifically with being anti-Trump because they're kind and loving and open and accepting, and he's not. He's a rotten bastard. He's a rotten bastard. And there was a video of him dancing once, like just he was just free. He was just dancing, and the hateful, mean, spiteful, bullying comments about that, I was just like, hey guys, who's the jackass now? For who teases people for dancing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the shadow right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How's that landing on you? I can see in your face.
Um,
It's hard.
I think it's like it's like my if I saw a quite frankly, if I saw Hitler dancing, I would still, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. And that's a terrible comparison, but it's like, has Trump earned this, you
But
know,
that's because I mean, I guess we could go off the rails here, but I think it's important. Let's just hover around this for a moment
yeah,
if we can, because while we may not, we may have very strong feelings around, this individual, which clearly so many of us do. But can we see how we have parts of those things that we hate about him in ourselves? And is that not being demonstrated when we choose to bully him? Is that not the same thing? Can we see how
yeah,
that's the same? And can we be more elegant in
yes,
our analysis of
yeah.
why we feel strongly that,
I like that.
you
Yes,
know,
yes, I like that.
because it devalues us.
Yes, yes. When we rush to that, yeah, yeah. I think the idea of starting with empathy, always starting with empathy, right? So seeing the humanity, the whatever, starting there, then making some decisions based on that, but starting there, never losing that, I think is where you and I would be absolutely aligned. And this work would be absolutely aligned. Um, and I was also thinking that there's something about releasing ourselves from being subject to these predispositions, these attitudes, and instead objectify them so that we can look at them instead of
Mm-hmm.
through them. There's so much power in that.
Say that one more time.
So I think there's something about objectifying the shadow as opposed to being subject to it.
Oh, yes.
So to be
Mm-hmm.
able to do this work, right? Because then we
Mm-hmm.
we can make decisions based on it, based on data, based on blah blah blah, rather than just impulse.
Yes. If I were going to be my saboteur is the stickler, so I'm going to
Yeah,
get
dial it in, dial it in. Yep.
stickler in there. Is to be and just with the words, I would be conscious of not objectifying too much, where it's just like a conscious dissociation versus a subconscious, but like a conscious being subject to it, if that makes sense, right? We want to embrace that it is part of us.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, yeah, just
You're absolutely right. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah, we can't become so dissociated from it that well, we can't. We just can't. I mean, it comes from
you
us.
never can exactly.
And the idea isn't to keep it outside of us. It's to it's to have some elegance around understanding it before we own it again, or right?
Exactly,
We can own
right.
it differently. Yeah, it's not to just get yeah. So that's awesome. That's awesome, and I like the idea that the listener to this podcast immediately, like the next person that you run into, that there's a little bit of a oil and water. Maybe it's a direct report. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's you go home and it's your partner. Is just to pause and say, what is it about that person that is? What can I learn from this prickliness about myself, or what can I start to investigate? And
Mm-hmm.
that might be the shadow.
Yeah, that's a really great way to start. And then also, um, you know, going ahead and maybe using the exercise where what's the worst thing that someone could say about me, and
Yeah,
then seeing how you might be demonstrating acting out on that in the workplace. So for example, if the worst thing somebody could say to you was, you're not intelligent, then, are you showing up at work as a know-it-all because you're terrified that maybe you don't know something? Are you talking too much in meetings? Are you the person picking apart the PowerPoint slides, saying that there's a typo in the PowerPoint slides because you just have to take every opportunity to show that you aren't brilliant? And how might you give yourself some grace and be like, wow, nobody can know everything. Maybe there's, maybe I can take a stab at not taking up so much oxygen in the room and just settling into the possibility that I don't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's just, yeah.
Yeah. So you're in my head and you're saying, I don't know, I do all those things, but yeah,
We
I
all
think
do.
you're dead on. Absolutely right. Kendall, are there any other resources that you can point people to if they want to hear some more or understand some more about shadow work?
There's so much out there. There really is. You can look
Does
on,
Debbie still do the workshops?
Debbie has passed,
Oh,
unfortunately. Yeah, I was really lucky to have worked with her before she did. And she has passed the baton to Kelly. I think her last name is Coslow. And I think you can go to the Shadow. You can just look it up online. Last time I checked, because I did want to do the workshop again, I didn't see any scheduled, but there's still resources on the website. So you can look there. Again, the Dark Side of the Light Chasers book. If you're into the technical side, you can read Carl Jung's book on it. And then there's a lot of people on YouTube talking about it. I
okay.
don't have anyone I would recommend, though, that I've seen talking about it. You can just kind of go through and see who's maybe the best fit.
Do you bring shadow work into your executive coaching work when you're working with clients?
Um, I haven't consciously, actually. That's a great call out. No, I haven't consciously.
I'm just thinking how
I
hard this would be to do on your own.
Well, I think actually, let me back up. I think I do, and I'm glad you asked that question. That my mind went here because I want to be clear that the shadow can also be positive aspects of ourselves. So I think I bring it in more in that way, right? So people with imposter syndrome. I mean, imposter syndrome is like a great. That's the shadow
Yes.
right there, right?
Yes.
I'm not bright. I don't have this thing that I need. It's like, yeah, you probably do. Like, let's dig in there and find that. So from a positive aspect, I do, and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that feels like a whole nother thing, like how to uncover the positive shadow. But it's the same thing? Like how does
It's
that
kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing with the positive, right? So pick a celebrity who you just absolutely love and what you love about them so much and why they light you up, or, there are aspects of that that you hold yourself. And especially, I think it's powerful if you're like, I could never be like that.
Mhm.
Maybe there's someone who is very, I mean, I think we see it also in romantic relationships, right?
Mhm,
Opposites
mhm,
attract.
mhm.
You're
Yeah. I gotta say, listener, I think I'm one of the luckiest people in the world to have Kendall as a friend and colleague because I'm thinking about it now, even some of the conversations, the intense conversations that we've had you probably have done it more consciously than I have, but we kind of help each other understand each other's shadows, right? And to put them
Absolutely,
into
we do.
in a respectful container where we laugh a lot, right? I think that's pretty amazing. So my parting wish for folks that are listening to this is, pick up the book, do some research, and then find somebody to work with on this, whether it's your coach or a really good friend who understands the significance of this kind of work. So, Kendall, thank you so, so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Danny.
You bet.
Hope
All
to
right. See
chat
you
with you
soon.
soon.
Thank you. And dear listener, thank you for joining us. This is Danny Ceballos with Unleashed Consulting and the Best Boss podcast. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye now.